at least our final presentation. Oh, and I'm gonna for the phase 4 track 2 technical working groups on the ramp and GRC data templates. I'm gonna run us through a quick safety culture message. Natural gas safety. So natural gas is a reliable and efficient energy source, but it can pose serious risks if not used safely. The National Fire Protection Association reports an average of 125,000 residential gas leaks and 4,200 gas-ignited home fires annually. Practicing proper natural gas safety can reduce the risk of fires, carbon monoxide poisoning, and other hazards. Here are some essential tips for staying safe with natural gas. Never leave a car running. Avoid running your car in a garage or other enclosed area to prevent the buildup of deadly carbon monoxide. Not really sure how that's related to natural gas, but probably should have looked at that a little closer before I started doing this natural gas safety culture message. But check gas appliances regularly. That's important. So inspect your stoves, water heaters, and other gas-powered appliances for leaks or damage, and schedule professional inspections annually. Ventilate properly and ensure gas appliances are adequately vented to avoid harmful gas buildup in your home. And know the signs of a gas leak. If you smell rotten eggs or hear a hissing sound, evacuate immediately and contact your gas company. I'm going to put a link in the chat to provide you with some extra information that I promise has nothing to do with leaving your car running in a garage. Okay. And let's just go through a couple of logistics for this morning. This meeting is being recorded. One or more decision makers may be present during the meeting, but no decisions will be taken. I'm not sure if there's a decision maker in the call at the moment. Doesn't look like it. So let's go ahead and go through a roll call. SPD is here. Is the Public Advocate's Office here?
Yes, we're here.
Thanks. And is SCE here?
Eddie, SCE is represented.
Thanks, Brian. And is PG&E here?
Yes,
Anyone?
PG&E's here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Anyone from the Utility Reform Network, Turn? Anyone from Semper Companies?
Morning, Eddie. Yes, we're here.
Thanks, Josh. And anyone from EPUC-IS, Energy Producers Users Coalition Indicated Shippers, or Mussy Grade Road Alliance, or Protect Our Communities Foundation, or Utility Consumers Action Network. And if there are any other parties that would like to be represented, please either raise your hand or you can put your information in the chat. We'll be represented there. Let's see, go over some other participation issues. IT related questions can be directed to Jacob Wilm. And Jacob, if you could put your email in the chat, just in case folks have any issues, they can send an email to you. And then attendees have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. We do ask that everybody stay muted except during the Q&A period. And we're going to run through our presentation and then we'll have a Q&A period directly after that. And I don't think it will take us too long to get through our presentation. So we should have ample time to do the Q&A. But so during the presentation, if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to place those in the chat box. And if there's not enough time to respond to all the chat box questions during the workshop, we will collect answers to those questions and circulate them to the service list. During the discussion, please use your hand raise function, and I will call on everybody in the order that Teams provides. And then you just might pay attention to see if Teams lowers your hand or not. It's been doing pretty good on that. Let's see. Again, just the agenda is going to be SPD running through its presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And then at the end of today, I'm going to issue a couple of polls. I'll issue one poll during the break, which is going to try to get some feedback on whether or not Teams is working for everybody, and just doing like a quick check on whether or not folks are happy with this transition to Teams. It's worked for SPD so far. And then in terms of tomorrow, we're going to issue a poll at the end, perhaps like around 12:20 or so. We'll try to kind of wind things down. I have a few like just logistical details I want to go over with folks, and also I just want to get a poll and check the pulse about whether or not tomorrow is something folks are interested in continuing the discussion on. So with that, I think I'm going to jump into our presentation, and it's still me talking. Over the past 4 days, like we have heard, different approaches to structuring the data that underlies RAMP and GRC applications. And, I think all of us understand that these filings are complex and they cover many programs related to risk mitigations, risk scores, and other information. Since the adoption of the Phase 3 decision, Safety Policy Division has been leveraging its work in other RAMP proceedings and also in the development of the Commission's guidelines for the SB 884 program to develop the draft data template that we sent out for consideration during this technical working group. And today's presentation is really to provide an opportunity to help everybody get clarity on the field name, the field description, and the field value constraints for each variable that we put in our staff proposal data template. And we're going to provide some sample tables to help as like a visual explanation of like what staff would expect to see in a data template that once it's filled out. And we've learned a lot from everybody in the previous presentation. So today we are also interested in receiving some additional feedback from all of you regarding how staff could improve upon the draft data templates and guidelines. So I know everybody's probably, read through our template structure already, but we just wanted to provide a slide that gives like a high-level overview of the individual tables, and then we'll go into each in detail. So table 1 requires information for every mitigation and control for every risk described within a RAMP or GRC application. The table is designed so that a large single file could be submitted with a RAMP or GRC application, and then parties could filter the information that they need according to risk, GRC, activity code. They could do it by tranche. And then while table 1 does include like a total cost field, table 2 breaks down the costs into its constituent parts. And Emily, my colleague Emily Chun, is going to be introducing table 2. And she's also going to introduce tables 3 and 4, which are unique to the electrical grid infrastructure. And then I'll come back and discuss table 5, which is unique to the gas infrastructure risks in the RAMP and GRC. And then table 6 includes some important inputs for calculating risk and also benefit cost ratios. While table 7 is the key inputs for calculating a monetized value of electric reliability using the ICE calculator. And I'm, in the Q&A session, I'll be happy to answer questions, but I also have our SMEs, CJ Patel and Amin Amrani, who will be helping us answer some questions if I'm not able to. And for table 1, one of the things that's really important is that it hinges upon 2 crucial fields. The first is the RRU ID and also the proposed and alternative mitigation fields. In fact, the RRU ID is crucial to linking tables 1 through 5. So we wanted to take a moment to clarify the naming schema for the RRU ID value. A utility's RRU ID naming schema must include the GRC activity code of the relevant proposed mitigation program. And as we discussed in workshop 1, an RRU is a disaggregation of a mitigation program, which means it must have a GRC activity code. Both the activity code and the proposed mitigation program name are also fields in table 1. Beyond the GRC activity code, the utility can add additional alphanumeric characters to distinguish each RRU. And we'll show an example here in a minute. But however, it is important that this naming schema is simple and transparently understandable. So one would not expect to see an RRU naming schema with a random selection of alphanumeric characters, and we wouldn't expect to see a naming schema that is like 42 characters long. Most importantly, a utility's RRU ID naming schema must not result in the reuse of an RRU ID. Now, each RRU will have a proposed mitigation, which will be listed in the proposed and alternative mitigation field. For comparative purposes, the utilities would also be required to submit 2 alternative mitigations for each proposed mitigation. And this means that in the data template for each RRU, we would expect to see 1 row with information relevant to the proposed mitigation and 1 row with relevant information for each alternative mitigation. So that's three rows for each RRU. And as we'll see shortly in the example, that will mean many of the first fields in the data template will exhibit repeated values for those 3 rows that correspond to a given RRU. And so other than the RRU IDs, some of those initial identifying fields include the GRC activity code, which we just talked about in the previous slide. And so we just put these field descriptions here just in case anyone would like to return back to these slides to discuss some of these definitions. So moving on to the tranche level field, here staff expect the utility to present the structure of the tranche in terms of which lore and core quintile was used to establish the tranche in which that RRU resides. And so this structure must be based on the requirements for tranches found in the phase 3 decision. Now, if the utility writes a white paper to support an alternative approach to tranches, then a clear and easily understandable shorthand must be developed for reporting in this field. One last point about this, as discussed in the phase 4 workshop staff proposal, each RRU can only mitigate the risk of assets or systems found in a single tranche. So the utility can only present a single answer in this field. Now, regarding the other field on this slide, staff are expecting the utility to present a list of the assets of systems that exhibit risk, which is mitigated by the RRU. And although we have provided a couple examples here for the electrical system and the gas system, we would expect that this field could also be relevant to risks that are not directly related to the electrical or gas infrastructure. We also understand that the electric and gas infrastructure can have a hierarchical structure, and staff hope that that hierarchical structure can be listed within this field. And I think our example will hopefully help explain what we're thinking of. And so here we have 2 RRU examples relevant to the electric grid, and and then the 2 electric examples are undergrounding projects, which we can tell from the GRC activity code, or what PG&E might call the MAC code. And then we just added, RRU after the MAC code, and then we just added a few alphanumeric characters at the end to distinguish these 2 RRUs. And of course, you could add additional alphanumeric characters, but like I said, we would hope that this would not be like a long string of random numbers. So the 2 RRU examples listed include assets that are associated with different tranches. The first tranche is made up of the highest lore and core quintiles, while the second tranche is made up of the highest lore and the second highest core quintiles. And finally, we can see the list of assets which exhibit a certain amount of risk that is mitigated by the RRU. In this list, we have a circuit protection zone, so we call it the CPZ ID number 1. It's just our hypothetical example. But it tells us that this RRU is mitigating risk on that high level isolatable circuit segment. And then within that CPZ, there are a number of poles and other assets. And here we have only listed the poles using the SAP notation that PG&E uses to kind of keep track of assets. SAP is a database, at least that's as far as I understand. And we can have maybe a discussion about that in the Q&A. But we recognize that polls have other notational formats as well, and staff just expect that the utility will provide an explanation of this notation in the ramp narrative, or maybe in the cover letter tab for their data template submission. So the goal of having this list is to ensure that the utility is transparently keeping track of which assets and systems are being mitigated for a given risk. And this will help prevent any kind of double counting and make future audits of a utility's revenue request far easier to conduct. We do recognize that the utility can make changes to the naming conventions of assets that might be mitigated by the RRU. And that's why we have established the risk model change tracker. And Emily's going to discuss that in just a bit. Now, as you may have noticed, all of the information for each of the undergrounding RRUs have 3 identical rows, and there are and that is due to the proposed and alternative mitigation field, which we'll discuss in the next slide. So we've already discussed, how the proposed and alternative mitigation field must be structured, and this will become more obvious once we see that example in the next slide. But after this field, all of the risk and cost-related calculations that are required by the data template are based on what mitigation is listed here in this, or which value is listed here in this field, either the proposed or the alternative mitigations. And here we also wanted to point out that the utility is expected to provide 1 or 2 justifications, but only for the proposed mitigation. So staff feel that most of the folks attending this workshop are fairly familiar with the concepts of pre-mitigated and post-mitigated likelihood and consequence. So for the sake of convenience, we have only listed out like pre and post-mitigated risk, which should be a dollar value in the example, just to kind of keep everything nice and neat on this particular slide. And you can understand why each of the undergrounding RRUs has 3 rows that are mapped to the proposed mitigation, which is obviously undergrounding, and 1 covered conductor alternative and another covered conductor plus vegetation management alternative. And again, the justification is only necessary for the row, these 2 justifications here, that's only necessary for the row associated with undergrounding. And as we can see, all of the risk and cost related data will be based on which type of mitigation is listed in the proposed and alternative mitigation field. Now, naturally, the pre-mitigated values should be identical because the assets being mitigated by the RRU are all the same in this example, and therefore exhibit the same amount of risk. So the main difference will be in the post-mitigated risk field, and differences would be expected for all of the post-mitigated fields and the cost field, since this row could be relevant to the alternative mitigations. And that's what we have listed here. So I'm going to turn it over now to Emily to walk us through the next couple of tables. And Emily, feel free to take it away, and I'll move the slide deck forward for you when you're ready.
Thank you, Eddie. As Eddie mentioned, the RRU ID and proposed and alternative mitigations fields link the data in tables 1 to 5. Even though these 2 fields do not appear on this slide, they are required and essential fields in table 2, which breaks down the costs associated with each proposed and alternative mitigation, including but not limited to labor, materials, permits, and environmental costs. Labor includes all the required engineering, design, and construction costs. Materials and permits and environmental costs are self-explanatory. Costs that do not belong in labor, materials, permits, and environmental fields may be categorized in the other costs field. The sum of the costs is reported in the total costs field. For each row, the total costs in table 2 should be the same as the total costs in table 1. The reporting date is the date when the data templates are filed or reported. Lastly, the calculated date is the date when the costs for the proposed and alternative mitigations are calculated. It's typical for the calculated date to precede the reporting date because the data in the tables are usually prepared prior to filing. Let's take a look at examples in the next slide. Thank you, Eddie. As you can see, the RRU ID and proposed and alternative mitigations fields are included in the examples here. Each row in table 2 ties to a row in table 1. The examples here show the cost breakdowns for the proposed and alternative mitigations for 2 different RRUs. For each RRU, one can compare the cost breakdowns for 3 different mitigations: undergrounding, cover conductor, and cover conductor plus vegetation management. The table shows that undergrounding is more costly in all cost categories than its alternatives. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Table 3 is the risk model change tracker, which is specific to the electric grid infrastructure. In some cases, utilities have updated their risk models between filings, which have rendered outputs that are substantially different from the previous model. In other cases, utilities have changed the length and names of circuit segments, which have created much confusion and obscurity. To address these issues, staff have created the risk model change tracker, which tracks changes and updates to the risk model and how that affects the risk associated with the assets and systems mitigated by the RRUs. This allows for comparing risk models, risk scores, and other changes between filings and ensures transparency and accountability in how risks in the electric grid are managed and reported. The first field in this table is the RRU ID, even though it's not shown here. If some aspect of the RRU changes between, for instance, a RAM and GRC filing, then the utility must list those change RRUs as a row in this table. The current risk model is the name and version of the updated risk model used to calculate the risk score for the assets mitigated by the RRU. The following current fields, total miles, HFTD miles, pre-mitigated risk score, and risk percentage, are dependent on the current risk model. I won't go through each of these fields as they are not new concepts. The change type is the identification of how the assets or systems mitigated by the RRU have been redefined. The inputs in this field include new data inputs to risk model, meaning that between filings, the utility has included new data that impacts the calculation of risk for assets that are mitigated by this RRU. New construction means new construction that impacts the assets listed in Table 1 for this RRU. Renaming is the renaming of assets listed in Table 1. Split is the splitting of an asset listed in Table 1. Merger is the merger of assets listed in Table 1, or other. The change date is the date when the change identified in the change type field occur. Additionally, Table 3 includes fields for the same risk data based on the previous risk model, such as previous risk model, total miles, HFTD miles, pre-mitigated risk score, and risk percentage. These allow comparison of risk data between changes in risk models, as well as tracking of changes in circuit segment length. If the risk model does not change between filings, but there are still changes made to the assets mitigated by the RRU, such as calling the same asset by a different name or identifier, then these previous fields would be reported as not applicable. Let's turn to the next slide for examples. Here is the risk model change tracker for 2 RRUs. As you can see, between risk model V3 and V4, the pre-mitigated risk score has changed because of new data inputs to the risk model. We can see this change when we compare the current pre-mitigated risk score and the previous pre-mitigated risk score fields. Next slide, please. Table 4 is also specific to the electric grid infrastructure. This table collects information on assets located in the HFTD and how mitigating specific associated assets can affect the risk reduction, causes, and BCR of the proposed RRU. In the first 2 fields, the utility would record whether the assets that the RRU mitigates are located in HFTD Tier 3 or Tier 2. Then the utility would also provide the number of miles in the wildfire rebuild areas, if applicable. The next field is similar to the list of assets in Table 1, except that here we are looking for the low risk associated assets. These assets might be included in the RRU due to operational constraints or the need to mitigate risks that exist on secondary and service lines. In addition to listing out these associated assets, the utility would include a number of work units in the next field. The subsequent causes and risk reduction fields would be based on the specific mitigation and associated assets that would be mitigated. We can see this more clearly in the examples in the next slide. So again, the RUID and proposed and alternative mitigations fields link each row back to a row in Table 1. In the associated assets field, if the utility does not plan to mitigate any associated assets, then the utility may leave this field blank and report 0 in the corresponding causes and risk reduction fields. This can be seen in the second and third rows. The causes and risk reduction change depend on the associated assets that would be mitigated and the mitigation itself. In the last 2 rows, an associated asset of 0.262 miles could be mitigated by cover conductor or covered conductor plus veg management. The latter yields slightly higher risk reduction, but also higher costs. Mitigating associated assets by undergrounding is overall much more expensive and yields similar or slightly higher risk reduction. The benefits and costs of mitigating associated assets will likely result in a lower BCR for the RU. This concludes my part of the presentation. I will now hand the spotlight back to Eddie, who will present tables 5 to 7.
Thanks, Emily. So the information associated with Table 5 is only relevant to the ROUs that reduce risk on gas infrastructure. And in the first 2 fields, the utility would record whether the assets that the ROU mitigates are located in high consequence area miles or the moderate consequence area. And then although it's not listed in this slide, the next field would again be the proposed and alternative mitigation field, and the subsequent cost and risk field will be passed on based on which proposed or alternative mitigation is represented in each row. And so the next field is similar to the list of assets in Table 1, except that here we're looking for the low risk associated assets for gas infrastructure. So it's fairly similar to what Emily just described for the electric assets. And these assets might be included in the ROU due to operational constraints or the other reasons listed here, such as like environmental factors and broader infrastructure coordination. In addition to listing out these associated assets, in the next field, the utility would include the work units. And here we can see an example. And in Table 5, we can see that the ROUID helps to link that information back to Table 1. And then the proposed and alternative mitigation field helps us understand what the cost of risk reduction for those associated assets would be for this particular proposed mitigation. And while this table is only relevant to gas infrastructure, the structure of the table operates quite similar to what Emily just discussed before. So I won't go into any details here, but if you have questions, my colleague CJ Patel and I can try to help answer some of them for you. So I believe most of the financial inputs that are required by Table 6 should be fairly well known to everyone on this call. I think we actually discussed a couple of them yesterday. At least the PVRR I know came up a couple of times. And one thing I would note is that in SPD's experience, a utility typically has more than one terrain modifier. And if that is the case, we would expect the utility to add a field for each terrain modifier and include the field in this location. And then the 3 discount rates are the scenarios required by the Phase 3 decision. The 3 monetization values for safety, electric reliability, and gas reliability were all required by the Phase 2 decision. This PVRR is a modifier that incorporates an estimate of the revenue requirement that would actually impact ratepayers for the lifetime of the asset. And then in SPD's experience, this value may be a value that's unique to a certain class of assets. So there might be one value unique to hydropower and another unique to the electric grid. So if that is the case, the utility should add a field for each PVRR, and the field name should specify to which primary risk it is relevant. So it's SPD's experience that there is typically only one escalation factor used throughout an application. But if that's not the case, then we're happy to receive feedback on how we could make adjustments to this field. And then in the final 3 slides, like SPD has listed, that the data templates most relevant for understanding how the ICE calculator is used to generate a monetized value of electric reliability. The first field is the most important because it designates the level of granularity that SPD expects the utility to use to generate the values for the rest of the fields in the table. In previous data requests, SPD has requested that the utility use the HFTD tiers and circuits enabled with protective equipment device settings, PEDs, as the level of granularity to generate a monetized value of electric reliability. With this current iteration, staff are asking the utility to provide data that would allow a slightly more granular monetized value of electric reliability using the ICE calculator. And this would require the utility to divide up each operational division by HFTD and non-HFTD, and then provide values for the remaining fields at that level of granularity. So just as an example, PG&E would provide the total number of residential customers within the HFTD of the current operational division, as well as the non-HFTD portion of the current operational division, and so on. We don't have an explicit example to share with this data template, but we look forward to any questions and feedback that you might have on this structure. And we've included all of the fields also in this case that are specific to each field in the other slides. So we can move back and forth between these slides if you have any questions. That's pretty much our presentation for this morning. And so I think we're going to open it up to Q&A, and we're happy to take any questions on any of the slides that we've talked about this morning. Yes, Brent.
Hey, Eddie. So I think a number of us reached out yesterday and I think Dan asked the question, will comments be allowed, or we're just assuming this is our only one time to discuss some of these challenges in this template?
So I don't have an answer for that. As I mentioned yesterday, I couldn't guarantee that I would have an answer for that question by today. And I unfortunately do not have an answer to that question yet, Brian. So,
okay.
So thank you for asking.
Oh, no problem. So just a couple of questions on this, and maybe just comments, things to consider. So for ICE, the fields that you're providing for ICE, let's just start there.
Okay.
Those are assuming that they're going to be the same in ICE 2.0, which I can't assume. We just don't know if that's going to be the case. So just wanted to make that aware.
Yeah.
The other one about HFTD versus non-HFTD, that may not be practical for all risks, or even for the way we're assuming for Edison's maybe next ramp filing and maybe different geography. So is there flexibility there?
A different geography. So one thing I would first say is definitely recognize that ICE 2.0 will be coming out relatively soon. And the decision does require the utility to utilize the most recent version of the ICE calculator. One of the recommendations that we put in our data template proposal was that staff be allowed to make updates to the guidelines, to the guideline document and to the template structure. And so if we discover that the ICE calculator has a very significantly different structure than what's presented here, we will definitely make sure that the variables are relevant to the structure that comes out from Lawrence Berkeley. Yeah. As for the HFTD, I think we would I think we would probably need a little bit more information before we could have a discussion internally about what type of geographical structure you were thinking about. Maybe I could give just a little bit of background on this, Brian. When PG&E first submitted the idea of doing a territory-wide ICE calculator calculation, we initially at pre-ramp workshops kind of floated the idea of, well, could you do this at a more granular level, including, the level of even a census tract? Because then you would be able to actually kind of overlay that with, for instance, the Calvin virus screen. And we received input that would not be possible for various reasons. I think just the way that the modeling is done by PG&E. And we've also continued to receive information from the Semper companies that they are also planning to do a territory-wide value. And so what we've found, what staff have found from our evaluation, is that definitely a disaggregation is necessary. So Brian, if you have some more details that you can share about what type of geography you think is not just important to SCE, but universally relevant to all parties, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't have information to share at this time, but I have another question about this template. If you go back to PVRR,
Sure.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that's required. I don't know if we can potentially pull that apart. I'm just not sure that's practical.
The PVRR, I mean, that's something that was submitted with your last ramp application.
I know, but I don't know if it can be done at that granularity you're requesting here.
So when you're calculating, I guess in your mind, if you're going to calculate a net present benefit or a net present cost, sorry, and not net, but a present value of cost, you wouldn't include the PVR calculation for a RRU level. Is that what you're?
That's correct. And also I'm just going to say it one time. I don't think the RRU geography or granularity has been sort of settled yet. So, and then I'm just conversing with my colleagues too. I don't know if we actually submitted PVRR in our last ramp. So I would check on that too.
I will double check for SCE, but my recollection is that when you calculated your present value costs, it should have included a PVR calculation when you were calculating your RSEs for your previous ramp.
Eddie, this is Chris Vias.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you think it must have been embedded in such a calculation? We made no PVR showing when we're doing our calculations that I can recall. But if what you're trying to say is that it must have been embedded, I'll defer to Gary and Brian on that. But I just don't recall that we made any such showing. I don't recall that we even provided it in any kind of follow-up data request or anything of that nature. And again, it's my recollection. It's been a couple of years now, but
it has. Yeah, no. I thought that in a work paper in the ramp, but it could have been a work paper in the GRC actually, Chris. Now that you say that, and at any rate, I do think that it's pretty important though that some form of PVRR calculation is available for in order to capture the proper present value of cost, because otherwise there could be a pretty severe undervaluation of those costs when you're calculating your BCR.
I think maybe we're confusing, and we can go back on this a little bit, but I think we're confusing the cost of the mitigation with the revenue requirement for the mitigation.
Right. I understand that, but when you calculate present value, you're looking at the impact of the mitigation over the life of its use, correct?
That's correct, but that's different than PVRR. I would just recommend you take a look at that specifically.
Okay. Is anybody on the call from PG&E? Because I am certain that in the last PG&E ramp that a calculation for PVRR was included in their calculation for cost benefit ratio.
We do include PVR multiplier, we call multiplier to account for those cost revenue requirement for the customers, right? So capital costs are multiplied by PVR multiplier by asset class, and then that is used in the denominator of the CPR.
Yeah, Brian, did that help clarify a little bit, or?
Yeah, I just don't think SCE does that. So that may be just PGE specific.
I see. Yeah, that's actually important to know. So I appreciate that. And I think though that in general, what staff are looking for the data templates is, the information that's relevant to calculating a clear and consistent BCR. And so, yeah, I think it does make sense to include a PVRR in your BCR calculation, the way that PG&E has done.
I'm going to be a lawyer just for a second to say that may be a preference, but it is, just to be clear for the record, it's not a requirement. It was not required in our RAMP or GRC, and there was nothing in the CPUC decisions on each that said we missed on a requirement by not including it.
Okay.
Nor did we miss on a preference by not including it. So just to be clear on that.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that, Chris. It's
Okay.
not written into the phase 2 decision when we specified to make the BCR a requirement. I think based on that, that will probably be something that staff will take back and reevaluate and think about how to approach that within our data templates. So thanks for raising that.
Yep. Thanks, Eddie.
Okay. Any other questions? Happy to move from any of the slides that folks may have questions about. Yeah, Gary.
Hi, this is Gary from SCE. Could you shed some light on the reporting requirements, as in, is this an annual requirement? Is this part of RAMP and part of GRC?
Right.
Just give some clarity on that.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, these are meant to be RAMP and GRC data templates. So we're expecting that this data template would be submitted with a RAMP application. And then we expect that when a GRC is filed, it would be some form of an update we would imagine would happen. And that's exactly why we are recommending that this table 3 be included, because we understand that there can be changes that happen between a RAMP and a GRC, and we would like to be able to know what those changes are. We think that's important information for anyone evaluating a GRC to understand what types of risk model changes, especially in the electric grid field. Did that help answer your question, Gary?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Are we that clear? That's great. Please feel free. Great, thanks, Vincent.
So I just wanted to clarify for non-asset related risks, what you're thinking around these tables here, table 1, table 2, so on and so forth. Employee safety risk.
So you're referring to, I'm assuming, this list of assets or systems field in particular?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So
what's your general thinking about this set of tables? It seems to be highly asset focused, right? But we do have some non-asset related risks. So I just wanted to get your thinking about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in that sense, that's why we've also listed out the term system. And it's why we had that discussion about the difference between assets and systems in workshop 1, and why that's kind of important is we would appreciate knowing, what is the system that's being mitigated by this RRU. And so if it's a non-asset based system, and maybe Vincent, you could provide an example of what you think would be difficult to include within this field, but we would appreciate understanding what that system would look like. I mean, just as a hypothetical, if it was like if the RRU is some type of employee training, then wouldn't the system be your employees? That's an example, I think.
I'm just trying to get clarity. It's like, what you would consider a system.
Yeah, I would consider a group of your employees to be a system. I think they work systematically, I hope. And so for a workshop or for some type of training for like safety or even cybersecurity, if you needed to do some type of cybersecurity training, I think something along those lines would be reportable in this field.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any additional thoughts, questions about data template? Yeah, Chris, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. So do the templates get much into the progress of the RRUs or at this
No,
time? Okay.
no, thanks, Chris, for that question. Our current thinking is that the progress for a mitigation program is going to be updated and reported in an RMAR, a risk mitigation accountability report. Now, what we have written in that staff proposal is that the RMAR, it should be established at the program level. I just want to make sure that's clear because I think there may have been confusion based off of some of the opening comments that I read. So what we want to emphasize is that the structure of both the RRU proposal and the RMAR proposal is saying that the RMAR is a roll-up of RRU level information. When the RMAR is presented, it should be presented at the program level. But since it is expected to be a roll-up of RRU data, we would expect that if an intervener or even if staff wanted to understand better the calculations that are being made at the program level, that we could issue data requests to find out more information about the progress of that particular program. And then in that case, a data request could, understanding is that these templates could be really useful for that particular type of data request. If you wanted to get more information at this RRU level about how the RMAR calculation is done, you could use these templates to help get that type of information.
Okay. Yeah, I guess one of the things that we're interested in really understanding as part of these templates is having a clear understanding of what work is being completed and what work is being prioritized. So I think, we'll probably want to have some further thought about that, but got it. And one other thing is, are these templates, what's the frequency for reporting of SPDs proposal for the templates?
Again, it's the ramp and the GRC. So this template would be submitted with the ramp, and then we would expect that there would be an update that's submitted with the GRC.
So typically those would be on a 4-year basis for the ramp.
But yeah, for the ramp, and then we would expect that potentially about a year after that there would be an update in the GRC.
Okay. All right. Thank you for kind of explaining that. Thank you.
No problem. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah, Yumi.
Yeah, I have a question on table 6.
Sure.
Financial inputs.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this mean to be just one table? Seems like all of the rest WACC discount rate, or is this supposed to be at the RRU level?
No. This is for the
Overall.
Yeah. So these are just inputs that are helpful for understanding how certain calculations are made. For instance, like the VSL should be a standard that's used throughout your application, right? Mm-hmm. And same for although for ICE calculator, you would have to create the different valuations for each of the operational divisions by HFTD or non-HFTD. So you would list those out. And then for the standard dollar valuation of gas reliability, I think so far we've only required one calculation of that. We haven't had a further discussion about how to break that down. And the same for the WAC and all the 3 discount rates. Those should be calculated individually. There's only one of those each. And as I said, the terrain modifier could be, multiple values depending on how the utility addresses terrain.
Yeah, that's where I'm confused about. I'm not exactly sure what terrain modifier should be.
Yeah. So my understanding is that for certain mitigation programs, the utilities will create a certain modifier for estimating costs. And if the terrain is more rugged and more mountainous, they tend to create a modifier that adjusts their cost estimate. Does it?
But wouldn't it be like mitigation specific, and would it be captured in the RRU table or mitigation costs side rather than the systematic financial table?
It could be. I think I'm gonna ask my colleague Amin Emrani to maybe speak up a little bit about that.
So this table is basically the values that utilities are using in other tables. So if, for example, you are using VSL, just one VSL, as Eddie mentioned, which is you use it in other table, but we wanted you to have it here as well. For example, for reliability, there should be several of that. For train, I believe that Edison has 3 train modifiers. So if you have just one modifier, it's fine. But it's basically, yes, you are right. You are using it in granular level in table 1 and 4. But here we just want to see those numbers separately. Does it make sense?
I'm not sure whether I understand, right? Isn't this supposed to be specific to a particular program if there is any?
Yeah,
right.
it
This
can
wouldn't
be
universal to all of the mitigations that are presented in the tables. And so that's why I'm not understanding why this would be a single value in a financial inputs table. Why not it's just captured through the costs?
Its train modifier is not single value. For example, for undergrounding, it can, I believe Edison has 3 numbers for that.
Yeah, then
Eddie,
shouldn't it be captured in the undergrounding RRU table or undergrounding mitigation table, and it can be shown through different cost per mile values in the table.
If I may interrupt before you ask the comment, so they do that, it captured in those numbers, but here we are just seeing the actual number that they're using. So if they put a formula and put those modifier in that, it's fine, but here we want to see actual coefficient. For example, for undergrounding, if it's hard, if it's like difficult, what's the number they're using? If it's medium, what's the number they're using? If it's low, what's the number they're using? But yes, you are right. In table 1, and specifically for electrical asset, if there are formula, they are using this number to calculate the cost. It's like a lookup table. It's just the numbers that they use in other tables. And as Eddie mentioned, for VSL, it's the same for everything, but for term modifier, it's different.
You're muted, Yumi.
Sorry. So basically, this table is meant to be some constant value that might be referred in the other table.
Yes.
Even though it may only apply to maybe one program.
Yes.
Yeah, Brian, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I get Yuma's point, and I just want to add, it may not be a multiplier. It may not be a coefficient. So it may be an actual value, which I think parties are more leaning towards. So again, I question the value of this, specifically if there are no programs that use this field itself. So just something to consider.
Okay.
Yeah, we can take that back and kind of brainstorm a little bit on what's the best way to get that information. Thanks. I appreciate that question, Yumi and Brian. Thanks. Any other questions? Maybe we could take one more and then we'll go to a break and let people think a little bit and answer our poll. And
can I just
Yeah.
provide one more input here?
Sure.
So this is intended to be comparing ramps for different IOUs, right?
Wait, sorry. Comparing ramps for different IOUs.
Comparing ramp data amongst the different IOUs as well. Is that correct?
So the data templates are primarily meant to help us analyze a ramp and GRC application. As far as its comparability, that certainly is part of our thought process, but I would say that the goal is mainly to just try to provide more standardization around how data is structured, so that each time that we receive, or so that each time parties receive the applications, we're not looking at completely different sets of data. It's not a typical way to address program evaluation the way that it's done right now. And this is very evident within the WMP world, where they do have very strict data template requirements, and it's conducive to understanding the way that risk assessment is done by the utilities. It's having a data template.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back around 11:10. So I'll give everybody extra time, 3 extra minutes to fill out our poll on Teams and WebEx. So please give us your feedback on this, and then we'll take a break and come back in about 12 minutes. And I didn't design the WebEx one correctly, but that's okay. Thanks, everybody. I'll be right back. All right, everybody. Gonna bring us back just about at the 11:10 mark. I appreciate that some of you have answered the poll. So far, it looks like Teams almost universally is preferred. Glad to hear that. If you disagree, I would highly recommend that you add your voice to the poll before the TWG is wrapped up. I'm going to open it up for the opportunity to ask questions one more time for the next couple of minutes, but if we're starting to trickle off with questions, I'll move us towards wrapping things up with this particular presentation, and then we can have a quick chat about whether or not we want to continue the conversation tomorrow. But judging by the lack of questions right now, I'm thinking that maybe we won't continue. Yeah, please, Gary.
Hi, this is Gary from SCE. Could you provide maybe, I know there's been a lot of staff proposal, long readings, but could you give me some context in terms of alternative proposals at the RRU level? Was that discussed in topic 1? Or is this a new proposal in topic 3?
Topic 3?
Well, this is topic 3, right?
Oh, this is, do you mean phase 4 track 2, I think is what you're referring to. That's what
okay, well,
the data templates are for
the data
today.
template. Is this a new requirement data template versus was this ever discussed in the RRU, in November, December timeframe?
Well, the alternative mitigations are required, I believe, by D1904.
That's correct.
021, yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, you're discussing alternative mitigations at the RRU level. Was this discussed previously, or was this something new in the data template discussion?
I believe that when we were discussing the RRUs, it was at the level of all mitigation level data. You're referring to workshop 1.
Yes.
Yes, and in workshop 1, we were referring, the RRU would be the level of granularity for all data that's associated with the utilities application.
But was it discussed that we would have alternative mitigations at the RRU, where each RRU had to have an alternative mitigation?
At the workshop?
Yeah,
or
in the staff proposal.
In the staff proposal. I would have to go back and look at the staff proposal to see
it.
if that was in there.
For example, I'm just thinking of a case where we decided to, in the proposed plan, we mitigated assets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But a new mitigation, maybe because of cost, we can only mitigate asset number 1.
Okay, so
that to me is a valid plan, because maybe this plan is much more expensive. We can only hypothetically mitigate only asset number 1. How would we structure that?
So what the alternatives are meant to do, though, is it's meant to provide the pre-mitigated or the post-mitigated alternative, right? And so if you're using covered conductor, right, on a certain number, if you were to use covered conductor on these particular assets, and maybe I can, then
I was not thinking of like wildfire. I would just want something like something other than wildfire. I think would be a good example.
Well, if you could come up with a good example, yeah, I'd be interested to hear why it would make a difference, because the ultimate goal of an alternative comparison is supposed to be an apples to apple comparison. And so I'm not sure why you would want to present something that wasn't an apples to apples comparison.
Well, then is it really a plan versus really just an apples to apples, right? In my view, a plan is, well, maybe this plan, instead of one budget, a smaller budget, or we're trying out new mitigations, which because we're trying out, we may want to, impact fewer assets just to, test the efficacy of that, right? But so in my view, that's a plan versus this is purely mitigation A, okay, we'll do mitigation B and just calculate a new set of BCRs. To me, that's not necessarily a plan per se. That's just
Right. So I think what you're referring to is a slightly more high level comparison, which is looking at multiple portfolios of proposed mitigations. So you would have potentially like a budget scenario where the portfolio is made up of, let's say, 100 undergrounding RRUs, but your other budget scenario is perhaps slightly less, and therefore your portfolio would only have, for the proposed mitigations, it would only have 80 undergrounding projects because you're saving money. And that's at the plan level, you would be comparing portfolios. What we're looking at here is the comparison of the proposed mitigation to the alternative, and therefore you would still be mitigating the same assets in your alternative mitigation so that you get an apples to apples comparison. Does that help clarify, Gary? I think the plan level is at a much higher level than the comparison.
I guess I'm not sure. I'm not seeing the. To me, they're two different analyses. So you're saying you want two different sets of analysis?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to present two different portfolios with different budget scenarios, you would be presenting those, but those budget scenarios are focused on the proposed mitigations. And then within those portfolios, you would have proposed mitigations and you would have alternative analysis across those to compare against the proposed mitigation.
Okay, I think as Brian suggested, I think written comments would be a good place for us to really convey our thoughts. So we'll look forward to see if written comments will be allowed.
An option.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, and yeah, thanks for the question. Any other thoughts on this?
Hey, Eddie, I just want to jump in. Fred Haynes here. Maybe it's obvious, but I think what Gary was speaking about is the idea that I think what we're envisioning by asking for data for RRUs between alternatives is I think we're expecting that alternative A would be an alternative mitigation that's intended to apply to all of the same projects as a proposed. And then that would be an apples to apples comparison. Like, for example, hey, we're proposing to underground these 100 elements, these 100 projects, and we look at an alternative, completely different mitigation. Let's say maybe covered conductor was the alternative mitigation, and how does that play out for the same 100 RRUs if that were to be done? I think that's what we have in mind to want to see comparisons. I think what the fellow was talking about is an alternative in his mind would be just like, what if I just did less work? I did fewer projects in my plan. Well, then, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to present the same, present data for RRUs that you weren't planning to work on at all.
Yeah, that would be a different portfolio. Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. If there's no other questions, I'll start to wrap us up and move us towards some final slides. Because I just do want to make sure that we're kind of clear about, let's see, where the next steps are. And so I've already shared most of the recordings from YouTube to the individuals that are responsible for writing the. Sorry? Okay, maybe somebody came off mute for a second, but seems like they went back. Oh, I think somebody called in. So I've shared all the YouTube recordings with the individuals responsible for doing the workshop recordings. Today, I believe Southern California Edison is responsible for today's workshop summary. If somebody could confirm that from SCE that you're expecting to work on that, I will. I think, is Dan Kamila on the line?
Hey, Eddie, Dan's out sick, but we can confirm, this
Okay.
is Brian, confirm that we are taking notes. In fact, it's going to be pretty easy because we've asked most of the questions today.
Okay, yeah, great. So then, no problem. Brian, would you prefer that I send the YouTube link to you then if Dan's out?
Send to myself and Dan. Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, great. And then, yeah, just as a reminder that all of the draft working group summaries should be shared by February 7th. Again, as we mentioned on the 24th, I think it's preferred that the utilities provide the summaries as soon as they're finished so that parties can make comment on them. So we would like to review those as soon as they're available. So I think it was PG&E that has been working on the first summary from the 24th, and just want to make sure that you'll be able to send that to us fairly soon. But then, yeah, Brian, then for SCE, the deadline for your final workshop summary would be February 7th. Great, thanks, Hannah, for the thumbs up. And then for those of us who are going to provide some feedback, we're going to provide feedback to the utilities by February 14th. And then I just want to remind everybody that the workshop summaries would be filed to the docket on my initial email had mentioned February 17th. Obviously, that's a working holiday, and so please make sure that they are filed by February 18th. I think that's stipulated by regulation that if it's a holiday, it moves to the following working day. So February 18th is the deadline for the working group summaries. In addition to that, our requirement for the technical working groups is that everyone file a PDF copy of their data template and the data template guideline to the docket by February 18th as well. Yeah, so we would appreciate everybody trying to meet that deadline. And then I would also appreciate it if the four parties could provide me with a Word document version of the guideline. I think that maybe didn't quite come through in the first submission. I think most people sent a PDF, and if you could send a Word version, I'd really appreciate that. And then also your Excel spreadsheet as well, the blank one. Maybe one quick question. I'm wondering, some folks provided examples in their template, and would it be helpful, as SPD has kind of presented some filled in data for the spreadsheet that we've been using, and we're happy to include that in our final submission so that folks can see what types of data we're expecting to fill out into those fields. If folks would prefer a blank one, then we'll just send the blank one. But just wanted to see if anybody has any thoughts or questions about that. If not, I'll probably just recommend internally that we'll submit the data template that has some examples included, such as what we provided in the slides today. Okay. If there's no other questions about that, yeah, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Just so that I'm clear on this. So then the summaries that get sent to the docket, those will be summaries sent by who will send the summaries to the docket, just so I'm clear on that.
The utilities will send the summaries to the docket after they complete them. After
Got it.
they receive feedback from parties. And yeah, on February 14th.
Got it. And then and then we're for folks who drafted proposals, we're going to update those, and then on that same day, February 18th, we'll be sending PDF copies of the templates and the guidelines, and also sending you a Word document.
Yeah, you would put your data template and guideline on the docket, and then you would send a Word version and an Excel version to SPD.
Got it. And then as far as the examples, are you saying that those templates that we send and or guidelines, I guess, that we send to the docket, those could be include examples as part of that same filing? Okay.
In the Excel, you could fill out the fields, and then you could just transform that into a PDF and file that with the docket.
Got it. Okay. But that would all be part of, it wouldn't be like two versions. It would just be one that would include some examples. Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's the most straightforward way to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, Hannah.
Just a quick admin question on the summaries. For the IOUs that are going to file the summaries by the 18th, are you wanting those summaries combined into one document and kind of a joint filing, or are you wanting all of those to be separately filed?
I think that's fine if they're. It's up to you guys how you want to organize that. But if you guys are comfortable combining them into one filing, I'm sure it's fine for one utility to submit it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, as long as the summaries are all in the docket, I think that's the most important thing. Any other admin questions? If not, then I'm gonna issue a poll just to make sure that everyone's okay with kind of wrapping up the discussion today, because if there's no additional questions for us, I just wanted to double check, are there questions for other parties that folks wanted to talk about? We still have another hour, and so we can continue that conversation here today, and or we could continue the conversation tomorrow. I'm seeing that there are some people that would like to continue the discussion tomorrow, and I want to make sure that that there's ample time to have discussion. So if somebody has a question and they would like to discuss it, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and speak up now. Or we could continue to have the discussion tomorrow. Yeah, I would like to continue the discussion if there's somebody who wants to continue meeting tomorrow. Is there somebody that wants to do that? And if so, could you come forward? Or did somebody press the wrong button? Okay. Technically, if somebody is interested in meeting tomorrow, I think that we should still hold the workshop tomorrow. But I'd like to hear from folks to see how they feel about that. Okay, somebody changed the vote. Okay. Okay, great. Are there any last minute questions that folks have? I know we're all busy and everybody has other topics that they need to complete, other tasks to complete. So if there's no other concerns or questions, I think we will go ahead and wrap up today's meeting. right. Thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate everybody's participation over the last 5 days, 5 business days, and yeah, looking forward to continued conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.